Today I'm going to be answering some of the questions that y'all left for me on our Facebook and Instagram. So I've got my handy dandy clipboard, so let's get started. Alright, so the first question was, what led you to start Pearl River Exotics? I didn't start it, Dalton did. He was big into carnivorous plants as a hobby, and he just kind of saw the opportunity to start a nursery because, you know, as a customer, whenever he would go to a website to purchase plants whenever they were having a sale, things would sell out immediately, and he couldn't get the plants that he wanted, and you know, all of that. So he decided to start his own nursery, and we've really just grown from there. When we first started dating, I was working at a daycare and not making enough money. I was in college full time, and shortly after we had been dating, he had to be gone for a couple of months. So he needed someone to watch after the business and take care of things as if everything was normal. And so I just kind of fell into it. And I've been doing it ever since. And this is now my full-time job. And then somebody asked what my favorite Nepenthes is. This is such a hard question because, I mean, how do you choose? You know, they're all so unique and so different and beautiful in their own way. But I guess if I had to choose some, my top favorites would be like Jambin, Bicalcarata, what else? Mapuluensis, because, you know, we rediscovered that on our honeymoon, so that was special. Man, there are just so many. Can I say all of them? Can all of them be my favorite? Because they're all my favorite. So all of them. And then somebody asked when you should repot. So repotting just kind of depends. If you have a plant that is potted in long fiber sphagnum moss and it's been in that pot for 2 years, I would repot. Long fiber sphagnum moss breaks down pretty quickly, especially when it's kept pretty wet. So you really want to repot about every 2 years, and that's mostly because your media breaks down. In some cases, you will find that there are roots growing out of the bottom of your pot, because some Nepenthes or other carnivorous plants have very vast root systems. If you have roots coming out of the bottom of your pot, it's time to repot. Someone asked, can upsizing pots too early cause issues? In my experience, it doesn't cause issues. If you replant a plant that has been through a lot of stress, it can cause the plant to stall more than if you had left it in its original pot. So, for example, with our pre-sale plants, we receive those bare root and we pot them up and then we ship them out to our customers. Well, those plants have spent about a week to 2 weeks in the mail, and then we pot them up. So once you get them, if you unpot them and then repot them, it can cause a lot more stress for that plant than if you had just left it in the original pot that we potted it in, because then that plant has been unpotted, shipped internationally, then repotted, and then shipped again to totally different conditions than what it was being kept in originally, and that's just a lot of stress for those plants. So in that case, it definitely can cause your plant to stall or stunt its growth. Someone asked for a potting or a pot size guide. I plan to do a video on this because it's a little bit hard to explain without being able to show you. But a lot of Nepenthes have very small root systems compared to the plant. So you can get away with keeping a large plant in a small pot because the root system for, a 2-foot Nepenthes can be like this. But at the same time, you don't want to keep it in such a small pot that it's top heavy, and then you risk your plant falling over because then you'll get damaged pitchers and leaves and you might break it, and that's just not good. So I plan on doing a future video to go more in detail about when to upgrade your plants. And then somebody asked what's better, long fiber sphagnum moss or peat? It depends on what you're growing. So if you're growing something tray method that's going to sit in water all the time or most of the time, it's better to use a peat base mix instead of long fiber sphagnum moss, because the peat base mix is not going to decompose as quickly sitting in water as the long fiber sphagnum moss. So when long fiber sphagnum moss sits in a tray of water, it always stays waterlogged, and that media can become anaerobic very quickly. And when it becomes anaerobic, it will break down very quickly. And this is what will cause your plants to die from root rot or fungal infections or bacterial infections, because our plant roots need water just as much as they need air. So if your plant roots can't get air, then your plant will die. Someone asked what substrate breaks down the slowest. So the mixes that are going to break down the slowest are going to be mixes that contain basically an all mineral mix. So that's going to be like perlite, pumice, akadama, kanuma, turfus, things like that. And the only thing that you have to be careful of is, say you're using akadama, if you're going to grow things tray method and have it sit in water, the akadama will actually break down and turn into mud because it's a type of clay. So with akadama, you just want to keep that in mind, and you want to top water that only. I'm going to ask what my thoughts on ultramafic media are and what plants you should use them for. I'm going to do my best to answer this question in the least confusing way possible. So, carnivorous plants evolved to grow in places that were uninhabitable for other plants, or where other plants have a hard time surviving. So ultramafic soils are high in magnesium and iron. With that, there are species of Nepenthes that naturally grow in ultramafic soils, or soils that are high in magnesium and iron. Do they have to have those soils to survive? No, they do not. So they can survive in them, but they do not need ultramafic soils to survive. That's just one of their many adaptations. They just have adapted the ability to survive in those conditions. But we grow all the plants that grow naturally in ultramafic soils. We grow them in cultivation, not in ultramafic soils, and they do just fine. There are some people that believe that growing plants in akadama or kanuma is better because they are more ultramafic, but both akadama and kanuma only have concentrations of about 3% of magnesium or iron, whereas ultramafic soils where these plants would grow naturally have more around 18%. So we don't have a good way to recreate ultramafic soils in our greenhouse setting, or in your grow tent, or however you're growing your plants. So yeah, hopefully that helps. I know that that's super confusing. I'll link some resources in the description below, so that you can do a little bit of reading yourself. And then somebody asked what temperatures you should grow in. So this really depends on what you're trying to grow. For most Nepenthes, you can get away with doing more like intermediate range, so 60-degree Fahrenheit nights and 80-degree Fahrenheit days. But I will link a really great interactive temperature guide for Nepenthes below. It's got basic information about the different species. It also tells you what elevation they're found at and what temperatures they grow at. So you can search by the species, and it's very helpful. We use it a lot. Then somebody asked what the most ultra highland plant is and what the most ultra lowland plant is. So in our experience, the most ultra highland plants are Nepenthes lamii and Nepenthes villosa. And then for the ultra lowland, in our experience, the most ultra lowland plants are Nepenthes bicalcarata and Nepenthes campanulata and northiana. What temperatures should you grow villosa and Edwardsiana at? So for villosa, it's an ultra highlander. There are some people that say that it grows best with nighttime lows of 45 degrees. We have only ever brought it down to like 50, 55 at night. And then during the day, you want it to be like 70, 75. And then Edwardsiana has a larger range. So for them, for at night, you want to do about 55. And then during the day, they can have temperatures up to 80 degrees. And then someone asked a very tricky question. They asked about lowland plants that can be grown in highland conditions and highland plants that can be grown in lowland conditions. So the plants that would grow well in highland conditions but are technically lowland plants, or the plants that are highland plants that would grow well in lowland conditions, are going to be plants that have a naturally wide range. So we're talking about plants that are found at very low elevations naturally, and then found at very high elevations. So some examples would be certain forms of ampullaria. Reinwartiana also has a very large range. Maxima tentaculata, Fusca, Gymnamphora. And like I said again, this is because they naturally have such a wide range where they're found. So this in theory means that they would be able to be grown in a wide range of conditions, or at least be able to tolerate a wide range of conditions. Asked about how to warm a greenhouse for lowland plants in the winter. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to figure out how many BTUs you need Link in the description below a greenhouse heater calculator, so you can put in your dimensions of your greenhouse, what it's made of, where you're located, and it will help you figure out how many BTUs you need, and then you can use that number to figure out what size heater you should get. But also, if you have any issues trying to figure out what size heater you need, or how to cool your greenhouse, or any kind of questions about building a greenhouse or a grow tent or your setup, you can also book a consultation with us, and we can help you figure out what to do. Someone asked how to deal with pests like scale or aphids. The number one thing that we recommend is to use something like Bayer 3-in-1. It's an insecticide and a fungicide, and it helps get rid of just about everything. The only thing you want to be cautious of is this is safe to use for Nepenthes and Drosera, but it is not safe to use for Pinguicula or butterworts because it has a fungicide, and fungicides are known to kill Pinguicula. You also want to stay away from copper insecticides or anything that contains copper because it is also known to have very damaging effects or kill carnivorous plants. Now, if you're not big into using modern systematic synthetic pesticides and you want to go an alternative route, there are more natural ways that you can control pests. So with like sundews and Pinguicula, you can increase their light levels, and as you increase their light levels, they'll increase the amount of dew or mucilage that they produce, and that will greatly reduce the risk of getting pests on those. As well as you can get some beneficial insects to go in your greenhouse or your grow tent or your tank. You can release ladybugs, lacewing bugs, or there are also beneficial nematodes that you can release that all help attack pest bugs. And someone asked about the tissue culture process. So Dalton just wrote a really great blog post detailing the tissue culture process and what our goals and future hopes are with tissue culture. So I will link that also in the description below, and you can go check it out because he explains it way better than I can in a short video. So I'll link that and you guys can check that out. And then somebody had a 3-in-1 question. So they asked, when will PRE tissue culture and Nepenthes be available? What our future plans for a breeding program are? And do we have future plans to expand the tissue culture program? So yes, and yes. The tissue culture plants that we have produced will be available shortly. So we actually just potted out some of our first Nepenthes mapuluensis clones, which is super exciting. I'm very excited about that. And those should be available as soon as we have them hardened off. And then as far as future plans for a breeding program and plans to expand the tissue culture program, those kind of go hand in hand, and Dalton talks more about that in his blog post as well. But we are slowly building our breeding program, and we hope to continue to do so because that is a huge part of our goal. You know, we are both very conservation minded and hope that we can do as much as possible to significantly help the conservation of carnivorous plants from all around the world. So you should definitely check out his blog post because, like I said, he goes into way more detail and talks about our tissue culture program and our future goals with that. And then somebody asked what the proper way to take a basil cutting is. So when you take a basil cutting, you want to use scissors and you want to cut your basil right at the stem where it comes off the mother plant. Now, you don't want to cut your basil when it's still really small, just because that doesn't give it the best survival rate. So I usually like to wait until you have a decent sized plant, you know, like 3 inches or larger, coming off your mother plant. And the reason why you want to use scissors is because if you pull off that basil and break it off the mother plant, you run the risk of pulling some of the tissue. And if you leave a big gaping open wound on your plant, you have a higher risk of infection for your mother plant. Again, I plan on doing a in detail video about how to take a basil cutting and what the proper procedures for that are. So subscribe and you will hopefully see that future video soon. Thanks guys, I hope that you enjoyed this video and I hope that I answered some of your questions. If you have any future questions for me, you can email us or you can reach out to us on Facebook or Instagram, or you can leave a comment below and let me know what questions you would like me to answer next. I had a great time hanging out with you guys today and I hope you have a good weekend. Bye!